So in these videos, we'll be taking a look at the particle system in Cinema 4D. We also take a look at forces you can use to affect the particle systems. Okay, so to create a particle emitter, you come to the menu, the menu bar, and under simulate, that's where we have the particles. So go to particles, we have the particle emitter. So the particle emitter simply emits particles. So right now, when you press play on your timeline, this is what it does. Okay, it's just emitting particles. That's what the particle emitter does. It emits particles. Okay, and you can increase the number of particles that emits. By default, we have 10 in the editor and also 10 in the render. That means it will emit 10 particles in your viewport, and then when you are rendering your scenes and you have an emitter inside, it will emit the 10 particles inside. You can increase it, so let's increase this to maybe 50. Then we have this. Okay, so it's emitting 50 particles in our editor, but when you render it, will emit 10 particles. Okay, and then we have the visibility. Okay, that is the visibility, just how the particles are visible. We have 4%, so 4% of the particles will be visible. But we have 100%, all the particles will be visible. Okay, and we have the start emission. You can choose to start it at any timeline. Right now we have 0 frames, so we start at the beginning of our timeline. Okay, when we change the emission to 12, it won't start until the 20 frames on our timeline, because we have changed the start emission to 20 frames. Okay, so the same as the stop emission. Okay, so with this, when it reaches 150 frames, it will stop emission. Our timeline doesn't reach there, so that's why. So let's increase this to 200, and then when it reaches 150 frames, you see it stop emitting the particles. Okay, and we have the lifetime. So how long does the particles last? So if you set it to 30, after every 30 frames the particles will die off. Okay, the particles will die off after every 30 frames. Okay, so we have the variation. Okay, we set it to 50, it will change the variation on frames that the particles will die. We have the particles dying at 30 frames, but it will vary it. Okay, it varies the dying points. Okay, like randomizing it. Okay, that is it. Okay, go to 0 and then go to 0. Okay, lifetime, oh, I want it to be 600. That's the default, so we have it. Okay, and then we have the speed. Okay, the speed is the movement, how fast the particles move. Okay, and then we can also change the variation of the movement, so it randomizes the movement of the whole particles. Okay. Okay, and then we have the rotation. Right now it's only emitting particles. Okay, but there's a way to emit objects. So when you emitting objects, you have the rotation, the scale, the variation, and then you have the show objects that is being emitted. Okay, let's look at the forces in this thing. Let's change the speed to 100. I think 100 is the default. Yeah. Okay. Now with the forces affect the particles. Okay, there are forces that will affect the particles. So with the emitter selected, let's go back to the simulation. Let's go to forces, and let's start with the gravity. So the gravity force will add gravity to the particles. So you see that the particles are now falling down because there is gravity inside. Okay, so that is what the gravity force is. It adds gravity to the particles. Okay. Now the next force we look at the turbulence. What the turbulence does is that it creates some sort of noise. Okay, so if you increase the strength of the turbulence, you see what the particles are doing, because there's a turbulence field here. So it's like it's diverting the particles in various positions, various paths. Okay, so that's what the turbulence force does. Okay, we call the wind. So what the wind really does is, you see this representation of a fan is blowing the particles. Okay, so let's select the wind, maybe take it here, and then maybe let's rotate it so that it faces this part. So now you see that the wind is affecting the particles, okay, where the wind is blowing the particles away. Okay, so that is what the wind force is all about. You can increase the speed of the fan. Okay, so with the wind, it's just, you see, there's kind of something like a fan that's blowing. So this is the wind force that affects the whole thing. And you can add turbulence to also the wind force. Okay.